Noam Chomsky, world-renowned political dissident, author, and linguist, now a laureate professor in the Department of Linguistics at the University of Arizona, Tucson. He taught for 50 years at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In December, Noam Chomsky will be celebrating his 90th birthday.
So take, say, the huge issue of interference in our pristine elections. Did the Russians interfere in our elections? An issue of overwhelming concern in the media. I mean, in most of the world, that's almost a joke.
The latest Gallup poll shows the most important problem for Americans is their current government. Immigration takes second place, racism and the economy are also a worry. Russia is one of the least important issues, with less than 0.5% naming Moscow, despite the hysteria whipped up by the mainstream media.
If you're interested in foreign interference in our elections, whatever the Russians may have done, barely counts weighs in the balance as compared with what another state does openly, brazenly, and with enormous support. Israeli intervention in U.S. elections vastly overwhelms anything the Russians may have done. I mean, even to the point where the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, goes directly to Congress without even informing the president and speaks to Congress with overwhelming applause to try to undermine the president's policies. What happened with Obama and Netanyahu in 2015.
That's what's also on the minds of tech giants like Facebook, Twitter, and Google, as revealed when the three testified to Congress.
It seemed to me you were each a little bit vague about, oh yes, we found hundreds or whatever. I'm asking specifically, were any of those other countries besides Russia that were using your platform inappropriately? It should be a yes or no.
I don't have the details. I know we definitely work to detect and repel attacks.
I know that, but were any of them other foreign entities other than Russia?
I would have to have my team follow up with you on details.
So you came prepared to help the Democrats establish about Russia, but you can't point out any other country? Is that right?
Congressman, we've put public statements on.
Okay, well, let me go to, you're not answering the question. Let me go to Ms. Downs. How about on Google? Did you detect any other countries besides Russia?
Our security team is trained to protect our services from foreign interference.
Are we going to get to an answer to my question?
My guess would be that our security team has
so you're here to guess.
attempts at breaching our security from other foreign governments as well, but that information is held confidentially even internally.
So you're only here to condemn the Russians. Thank you. How about you, Mr. Pickles? Are you prepared to identify any other foreign countries, or just here to help the Democrats blast Russia?
To make these decisions based on our rules.
You're very good at dodging and refusing to answer the question.
Did Putin come to give an address to the joint sessions of Congress, trying to calling on them to reverse U.S. policy without even informing the president? And that's just a tiny bit of this overwhelming influence. So if you happen to be interested in influence of foreign influence in elections, there are places to look. But even that is a joke.
We can now go live to Ted Raw, leading political cartoonist, columnist, and author. Now, the Congress hearing seems to confirm that tech giants are only looking for Russian meddling. Do you think it's right that companies should only search for interference from Moscow?
Well, I'm not even sure the United States is really in a position ethically or morally to complain about any interference in its election, considering the fact that the United States meddles in the foreign affairs and elections of countless other countries, has a long history of doing so, and is even at this point occupying several other foreign countries and has very client states all over the world. But if we do accept the idea that the United States is uniquely positioned to complain about electoral interference in its internal affairs, I would probably be starting looking almost pretty much anywhere except Russia at this point.
I mean, one of the most elementary principles of functioning democracy is that elected representatives should be responsive to those who elected them. There's nothing more elementary than that. Now, we know very well that that is simply not the case in the United States. There's ample literature and mainstream academic political science simply comparing voters' attitudes with policies pursued by their representatives, and it shows that for a large majority of the population, they're basically disenfranchised. Their own representatives pay no attention to their voices. They listen to the voices of the famous 1%, the rich and the powerful in the corporate sector. The elections, Tom Ferguson's stellar work has demonstrated very conclusively that for a long period, way back, U.S. elections have been pretty much bought. You can predict the outcome of a presidential or congressional election with remarkable precision simply by looking at campaign spending. And that's only one part of it. Lobbyists practically write legislation in congressional offices in massive ways. The concentrated private capital, corporate sector, super wealth, intervene in our elections massively, overwhelmingly, to the extent that the most elementary principles of democracy are undermined. Now, of course, all that is technically legal, but that tells you something about the way the society functions. So if you're concerned with our elections and how they operate and how they relate to what would happen in a democratic society, taking a look at Russian hacking is absolutely the wrong place to look. Well, you see occasionally some attention to these matters in the media, but very minor as compared with the extremely marginal question of Russian hacking. And I think we find this on issue after issue. Also on issues on which what Trump says, for whatever reason, is not unreasonable. So he's perfectly right when he says we should have better relations with Russia. Being dragged through the mud for that is outlandish. Russia shouldn't refuse to deal with the United States because the U.S. carried out the worst crime of the century in the invasion of Iraq, much worse than anything Russia's done. But they shouldn't refuse to deal with us for that reason. And we shouldn't refuse to deal with them for whatever infractions they may have carried out, which certainly exist. This is just absurd. We have to move towards better. There are, right at the Russian border, there are very extreme tensions that could blow up any time and lead to what would in fact be a terminal nuclear war, terminal for the species and life on Earth. We're very close to that. And we could ask why. First of all, we should do things to ameliorate it. Secondly, we should ask why. Well, it's because NATO expanded after the collapse of the Soviet Union in violation of verbal promises to Mikhail Gorbachev, mostly under Clinton, partly under first Bush, then Clinton, expanded right to the Russian border, expanded further under Obama. The U.S. has offered to bring Ukraine into NATO. That's the kind of a heartland of Russian geostrategic concerns. So yes, there's tensions at the Russian border, not notice at the Mexican border. Well, those are all issues that should be of primary concern. The fate of organized human society, even of the survival of the species, depends on this. How much attention is given to these things as compared with, whether Trump lied about something? I think those seem to me the fundamental criticisms of the media.